So I'm going to start asking a question first, if that's okay. It's my prerogative since I have the mic. I think it's coming back to a point that Paul made, and actually, Gavin, you and I were chatting about it earlier as well. So I mentioned earlier that it was really easy to fill this room, and there's obviously a real interest now in accessibility, inclusivity. But why is that? Why all of a sudden are we now all kind of interested in it? I mean, me too. I only just suddenly even heard the word inclusivity probably for the first time in the last 6 months. So it'd be good, interested to get to know your thoughts.
I'm just dying to answer this. It's very simple. I can remember I started work way back in the midst of time, and I've had 40 years or so working. It's only in recent years people have woken up about inclusion and accessibility. But maybe the cynic in me says, is that to do with the £249 billion spending value of that community of 13 million people? Perhaps?
So I would say that previous to the last 10 years, the reason that anything happened at all was because of people like Paul and anybody else who's lived their life disabled, because they were amazing advocates, and there are amazing advocates out there online now, and you don't have to go too far. Tanny Gray Thompson, Sophie Morgan, Mick Scarlett, these guys are out there. Liz Carr from Silent Witness, you'll have seen her. Obviously the guys from Last Leg. These are people that you know now because they're mainstream. They're being seen all the time. And there's lots of reasons for that. But they've been pushing for years, and they're now getting their opportunity. But in 2008, we had a little banking crash. And after that, everybody went, we need to start thinking about people. And yeah, it's easy to be cynical, but I work a lot with big businesses. And when I started doing what I do with big businesses, there was not anybody in that business whose job it was to actually work in areas like Tech for Good. But now, over the last 5 years, I have seen all of the big bank branches, all of the big companies now have very specific people who are employed. And thankfully, many of them are disabled. Microsoft, just look at the lead guys in Microsoft, absolutely phenomenal. And they are being employed within these organizations because the organizations don't just care about money. They care because the people who work in the organizations care about it because they're living it. And I think that's a massive change in society, that we're now actually reaping the benefits of all the work that's been done before by the likes of Paul and everybody else like him.
Anybody else? We can move on. Next question. So, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, so I have a question really to all of you, or any of you. So, between working in technology, like most people do, and doing what you guys do, there seems to be a gap, right? You can't just work at a big startup and then suddenly do something good, but there's like a learning curve, or what is it? Like, how do you get started? How do you get into it?
I think certainly when in my time at Shelter is that it's been incredibly difficult to recruit, and recently I've started to find it a little bit easier, in that people are starting to just become aware of doing good work and wanting to work for a place that is doing good work, and the work that they do means and matters. And so we've seen people who come and work at Shelter and they just stay for a good while. They work for a long time. I've been at Shelter for a very long time, and I still love it. I never dread getting up in the morning, going to work. I love my job, and I think that these guys will probably say very much the same, is that you get to a point in your life where you just go, okay, this is what I've been cut out to do. So.
For me, it's very simple. It's fueled by passion to make a change, to make a difference, maybe even to leave a legacy.
I don't want to kind of repeat what's just been said, but I just really agree with that. I think for a lot of people who work in this kind of work, it's really something about feeling like you're working and living your values, and that can be incredibly rewarding. It's obviously as hard as some other jobs can be as well. It's definitely not an easy ride at all. You also do not get the same kind of money you could get in a corporate tech startup for sure. And like, I'm still constantly surprised that we have a tech team because they have taken huge salary cuts to come and work at 38 Degrees. But I think as long as you can see the impact of the work you are doing and you can see the value it has in the world, I think we'll only get more people coming in.
Yeah, you don't get paid for it in a corporate startup either. Although please do queue later for jobs if you're wanting to invest. I would say that young people have always been able to dream about what's possible, and they've always had the ability to have integrity. And I think a lot of people who are working in tech are a lot younger, so they still have that ability to dream about what's possible. And they might be more comfortable about doing something that really truly means something to them at that young age. We can't hold on to that forever because people then get married, have mortgages, want to get promotions, and then they move away from necessarily what they get involved as a young age. But I think what we need to do is make the most of the young people that are in these lines of work and actually use their passion for actually making change now before they get a little bit older, bearing in mind that the next group of younger people will come along and they're still going to be passionate about changing the world as well. And a few old people who want to change the world, like me and Paul.
Cheers. Right, we'll open it up to the floor. Anyone got a question? Milasha, you this how?
Hi, thank you very much for all the very inspiring talks. My name is John. I actually work with charities helping them understand the potential of digital. And I think a really interesting common thread of what you've all shared tonight is about giving people an immediate voice, so being very responsive and amplifying that voice, whether it's to contact an MP or put a business on the spot and say you need to do better. And I'm interested in, with the startup culture, you've got maybe a lot of impatience, a desire to kind of move very quickly and make change happen quickly. But a lot of things charities work on take years to change. So how do you find that balance between being able to be really responsive, but also accept that some things might take a little while to change?
Is that to anyone in particular, or
Anyone at all?
anyone picking anybody? Sorry.
Go on, no, go on.
No, you don't know.
Fancy clockwise.
I've forgotten what I was going to say now. I was prepping to wait for you. I'm going to say something really controversial. Ready? So I worked for charity for 18 years, and charity, by definition, is the provision of services and financial support to people who are needy or those in need. And I think the future is, as we've seen, and as you quite beautifully pointed out with all of us, we're all dictated by what we're being told to do. Charity was never that. Charity was, this is what we're going to provide for you. And I think this next century is going to be increasingly charities being dictated to by people who would use that charity as to what they're wanting from that charity. Maybe even to the extent where when we've removed the need, there are no longer needy people. Now, whoa, give it 100 years. I hope by the end of the century, and I won't be around, but maybe somebody in here could maybe write to me and let me know what's happened. But I think that's possibly where I think we're going.
That is a very hard question to answer. It's definitely something I can relate to. I think I'd add another layer to the question you asked as well, because it is about how can you find a way through when these things take a long time? And I think the important question within that as well is how do you sustain hope and how do you sustain energy in that kind of, particularly if you're talking about changing power structures, if you're talking about really like disrupting or changing the world, that is not something that happens overnight. I think the thing that we have often done at 38 Degrees is try to find different ways to both talk about but understand how things change. Like how do you change people in power's minds? How do you change structures? And the key thing is finding a pathway. You've got to find steps and you've got to be able to articulate what the first step is and then what the third and fourth one is going to be. And it's fine if it's going to take 10, 20, 30 years to, for instance, have a health service that is properly funded by the government. But as long as you have steps along the way and people are going to keep believing, then it is worth going and you can still keep going. We've definitely not seen, for instance, that people drop off energy or don't participate in 38 Degrees because after 2 weeks they're like this isn't really working. I think we found the opposite. People keep coming back.
I've got something. Sorry, Paul. I don't know if you were passing on a comment. No, I didn't see you. Sorry.
I think it's about keeping hold of those dreams and those aspirations. It's very important to build yourself a wonderful post-it note dream wall or something so you lose nothing, and then have conversations with your stakeholders to find out what is it that's going to make the biggest difference to their lives, and focus on doing them one thing at a time as a series of stepping stones. We're 5. We still have enormous dreams. We still have a wall covered in post-it notes. We may never achieve them, but we believe we will, and that's the important bit.
Oh, really? Yeah, no, thanks. I just will, a little shout out to Jonathan at the back here. Okay, Jonathan's a guide dog owner. He's also an accountant. He's also going to be a programmer, I think, at some point. Jonathan, is that right? Okay, so this is how you change the world. About 3 weeks ago, Jonathan was in Perth. He lives in Perth, and they've built a shared surface, a shared street in Perth, which is a street where there is a pavement and a road where you can't distinguish between the two. The idea behind developers and designers here is that if you build that, then the cars will slow down to the speed of the pedestrians. It doesn't work, and it also means that when Jonathan is walking around with his guide dog, he has no idea where there is a curb edge and where there isn't a curb edge. And Jonathan went on to Twitter and just said, this doesn't work and it's dangerous. And nobody would listen to him for a couple of days, but it kind of went a bit viral after a couple of days. And then he was in the Courier, and then he was in the Courier again. This was 3 weeks ago, Jonathan?
2 months ago.
Or was it 2 months when you started it? Okay, maybe it's not that quick. But it's not 15 years. So Jonathan had quite a few conversations. He's on STV tomorrow, I think, or you should be at some point. But anyway, this morning, Jonathan got an email that said, well, it was a tweet that came out that said, "We apologise, we made mistakes, please join us in making sure it doesn't happen again." One person saying you made a mistake in how you designed it. And that reiterates what I was saying before about people who need something can change the world around them. And Jonathan did it. And well done, Jonathan. Can I ask you? And for the first time in his life, people come up to Jonathan and go, "You're Jonathan Attenborough," instead of, "This is Sam."
I guess it depends on whether or not you look at change in terms of what us as a charity are fighting for. So legislative change takes a long time to get through. The PRT, the private residential tenancy, that was 10 years in the making before we got to this point, and it's still not quite right. And so charities work in the background and they make change. And then it's about how we tell that story to people. And then on the tech side of things, certainly at Shelter, we're a modern tech team, and so change happens fast. We build things, we fail, we learn, we build something else. And so, don't just think because we're a charity that things, certainly in the tech side of things, takes a long time to get to fruition. It doesn't.
Well said, thank you. I do like the bit, Gavin, about Jonathan's story, that they didn't just say, "We're sorry, we'll fix it." They actually said, "Can you help us fix it?" Because, as you say, it all comes back to getting the users involved. If they'd done that in the first place, they wouldn't have been in that situation. So, well done, Jonathan. Any more questions from the floor? I think there was one hand at the back. Is that... Don't be shy.
I'm a little bit nervous now because I didn't get chosen first, but no. So I've just last week graduated from Code Clan with one other person that's in the crowd. And after Code Clan's next door, for those of you who don't know, they do a 16-week software development course and all this kind of thing. And afterwards, we have the opportunity to do what's called the client experience, which is like 2 weeks working for a social enterprise or charity. And Youth's Guide is one of the organisations that we're working with. I'm not personally involved in that, unfortunately. I don't think there's anyone from that particular group here tonight. But in that vein, what I've been thinking recently is about how exactly, I mean, this is a question that could potentially be put towards people from the Digital for Good organisation as well, or not organisation, group, is, you know, how exactly is volunteering organised as far as, you know, having developers being able to put themselves out there for opportunities to volunteer for voluntary organisations or charities? And is there a way that we can, as a community, actually kind of push that forward? Could we develop some sort of platform where we can actually have people that are both experienced and inexperienced put themselves forward for some sort of opportunity to help? Is that something that we should do?
Yeah, well, I think that is along the lines of what Digital for Good stands for. Do one of you want to say it?
Sorry, this is the first time I've been for one of these things, so maybe I'm asking a stupid question, but...
No question is stupid. Absolutely not.
Does anyone from the panel want to answer?
I think in terms of volunteering, we're always open to get volunteers, but no, when you're coming to volunteer at shelter, you're not going to do filing or booking appointments or organising meeting rooms. Exactly. So we are trying to make meaningful volunteering opportunities for people. So you can get involved. You can certainly come and volunteer in my team, and then I'll set you up with a developer, and we'll set you up with pair programming. So, you get that experience. On the flip side, devs have been resistant to do that because they think that they should get paid for that opportunity, and I can see that side of things as well. But the opportunities is there, certainly at shelter. So if you are looking to volunteer and see how a tech team operates in the real world, then yeah, we're open.
Anybody else? Do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, I can speak a bit. So in Scotland, there's our group, which the way we work is we engage with charities and we help them scope their digital visions into something that kind of works as a digital project that people can work on, and then we'll find volunteers. So with Barry here and Steve, we ran last month a hackathon for LGBTU Scotland, where 7 or 8 people spent a weekend building Twitter live data map integration for them for an event next year. So we do things like this. There is SCVO, which is a big organization that there's also a few people here from, so they match volunteers to charities. So you can speak with us, definitely. There's SCVO, there are a few things, but definitely there's more to be done in that space. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any further questions from the floor? Hi. I'll just get you the mic for a second, sorry.
I hear a microphone. Just feeding on from that question, on the volunteering side, I'd be interested in what the panel feels about volunteering, because my experience would be that only certain people are able to volunteer. You have to be from to have the time available, to have other sources of income. So it's one of those things within the third sector that I sometimes struggle with. So I'd be interested in hearing what your opinions are about volunteering, unpaid internships, and paying people for work.
So I think that if you are looking to volunteer, you are looking to volunteer for a couple of reasons. You're looking to volunteer to either build some skill, or you're looking to volunteer to make a difference to the charity. I've just registered to volunteer for the Dogs Trust, and the reason I did that is because I love dogs, and so it's not that I feel like I need to get paid to help clean kennels, but so that's a personal thing. So I think volunteering is very personal, and if I look at other charities out there and the volunteering opportunities they offer, and some of them are amazing opportunities, and in fact, people who've come and volunteered on our live chat have ended up getting a job in shelter, being a housing advisor. So, you know, it really depends on an individual person on what their motivations are for volunteering.
So I think that's a really good question. My response would basically be that the lines are too blurred, and it just needs to be really, really clear what the purpose and value of volunteering and what that entails. For instance, a kind of like, you know, giving up your time on a Saturday to participate in loads of great schemes that many different charities run, versus what is essentially a job opportunity or a career entry point that sometimes masquerades as volunteering, but is actually like an unpaid internship, and it comes with all sorts of biases and lean-ins and that sort of thing. So I think like that line just needs to be clearer, and non-profits need to get better at it. Because again, like companies know how to do this well, and our world just doesn't seem to have caught up as well with it. And I think, for instance, if you're coming into an office and you're shadowing, you're doing that sort of stuff, and you're producing value for a company, then that is too close to a job, and you should probably be paid for it.
I think for me it's a very individual thing. What we are looking for, we have numerous volunteers help us in all sorts of capacities, but every one of those has to be a win-win for that individual and for us. If you're not getting a balanced win-win, you're failing. And for many of our volunteers, it's about opportunity that's otherwise denied. So we may have disabled people who are volunteering, we may have people who are marginalised in other ways, so we can create opportunities. We tend in our volunteering to look at very bespoke projects, so they're very clear, this is the project, this is your part in this project, this is the duration of it, these are our expectations, you set out yours. So it's a very, very clear. I think I go with what you say, if the clarity's not there, it's crap.
Yeah.
You've got to be clear what you're trying to do.
Hi, Maddie Stark from SEO, but also from Digital for Good. For us, so Volunteer Scotland is there as a website, a portal that helps look at volunteer opportunities for those of you who are interested, but also, as Mother said, for Digital for Good, who's putting tech in touch with charity and charity in touch with tech. There's also Youth Link Scotland who are here, who provide lots of voluntary opportunities. And there's Inclusion Scotland, and I'm always here as well. So there are lots of different ways of getting involved, and there's also a lot of governance around volunteering. And as people have said, if you are thinking about volunteering, it's about how you want to do it and what's your commitment, what can you do, what do you want to get out of it as a person. And you could be a board member, so it's not just about turning up and emptying a stream of rubbish. It could be sitting on a board and helping with strategic decisions, as well as helping make one database speak to another database. There's lots of different opportunities. So if it is something you're interested in, then I would speak to us. There's Lawrence here, and I obviously there's lots of other charities here as well who offer this. So please do get in touch with us, and obviously speak to ourselves at Digital for Good as well. We can help. So that's just a massive shout out for us. Sorry.
No, great. No, that's really good. Thank you. We are probably just about out of time, unless anyone has a burning question that's going to keep them awake tonight. No. Okay. If you do think of questions afterwards that you really wish you had, or just were feeling a bit shy and you really wish you had asked it, just get in touch with any of the ProductTank people or Digital for Good, just through Twitter, any forum you can find, and we'll make sure they get to the speakers. It'd be helpful if you had a name, so we're not emailing all 4 speakers all questions, but certainly just let us know what you need to know. So on that, Milosh, do you want to come back up and we'll just wrap up? Sorry. So that was it really. First of all, I want to say a big thank you to the speakers. It was really fascinating and very varied within Tech for Good. So, it's a huge genre in itself. I do want to echo what Paul said in the fact that this is really, really important. And I personally am only opening my eyes to it myself. So I feel like I've come to this very late, but probably still a lot of people haven't even thought about it. So I'm not going to beat myself up too much. But I do like the fact as well that, ProductTank will move on. We'll have a different team next time round. But with Digital for Good, you've got, the conversation can continue. And hopefully, we'll see many of you at the next event, which I'm hoping to make as well. When is your next event?
So we haven't a specific date yet, but it will be next month. We have events every month.
Perfect. Okay, so sign up to the Digital for Good meetup if you haven't already, and we will continue this conversation
Right.
there.
And one
Okay.
more thing. There are business cards with like our Slack link and our website link. They're in the reception.
I think there's some on the
and by
table there as
entrance.
well.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yes,
Just grab one.
no excuse. Yes, sorry to be shouting over you. No excuse. So on that note, I just really want to thank everybody involved with helping tonight, and especially thank you all for attending, especially since the weather was so nice, and you could have been doing a lot of other things with the weather. It doesn't happen too often, so really appreciate you coming. Our next event is 26th of September. We will announce soon what we're going to cover. We're not very organised, so we don't know yet, but we will get there. And hope to see many of you back at either this event or Digital for Good. And let's keep talking about this. This is very important. Thank you. Good evening, everybody.